So it's.
Those online work when we get started.
That's 35%. Yeah.
Hey, this is Shay. I'm just testing my audio.
Ready to get started?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Live online, folks.
Melissa, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, sweet. I think we're gonna get started. Lindsay, did you want me to share your presentation or did you want me to give you the info to share it?
I can share it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll send you the Zoom link, and we'll promote you to panelist. We're not live yet, but yes, I'll send that to you too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, it is now 4:33 p.m. and I call to order this August 11th, 2026 public meeting of the Town of Silverton Historic Review Committee. Can we please have a roll call?
Yeah. Let's see. Committee Chair Alex Hernandez. I don't think. Online. Alex, are you online?
I don't think that.
All right. Well, present, Vice Chair Melissa Childs,
Here.
Greg Swanson,
Here.
Reese Mora,
Here.
Trustee Carl Schnecker.
Here.
And Melissa will be acting as chair today.
Okay. So moving on to revisions to the agenda. So everybody should have the agenda before them. Are there any requested amendments to the agenda?
Not from staff.
No? Okay. We can move on to agenda item 1, meeting minutes for June 2nd, 2026. So have you had a chance to review the minutes? Any discussion? No? Go, Carl.
I move to approve the meeting minutes.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Melissa Childs,
Yes.
Greg Swanson,
Yes.
Reese Mora,
Yes.
Carl Schnecker.
Yes.
Okay. On to agenda item 2, a presentation by Lindsay with the Historic Colorado, and she is present in the room. Hi.
Let me get this. You want to go to attendees
Oh, yeah.
and then, yeah, promote her with
No.
she can share.
Should prompt you in this.
And Lindsay, feel free to come up to the podium or sit at the table, whatever to do.
just get my presentation here.
And for anyone who hasn't seen Lindsay on a previous meeting, Lindsay is with History Colorado. And she is who helped us kind of navigate the CLG process and will be helping us with that process moving forward. So I think we're going to talk about some CLG stuff today.
Yes. Okay. Well, thanks for having me. I always think it's great to visit the new CLG relatively early on, and this was the first I could make it out here, so I appreciate being able to be here. And I've been here in person like once before, but not in the context of this job, so it's really great to be able to see everything in town. Yeah, I'm the preservation planner and certified local government coordinator at History Colorado. I've been in my role for about 5 years. So just to briefly go over sort of the historic preservation structure in the United States, and then I'll talk a little bit about the CLG program more specifically. And then I've got some material on design review and the Secretary of the Interior standards, including some case studies where you guys can decide if you would approve something or not. And then the very end of the presentation is just some thoughts about where you're seeing the direction of your historic preservation program and what's sort of motivating you all to be part of the committee and what you'd like to see moving forward. So our federal National Historic Preservation structure was determined by the National Historic Preservation Act in 1966, which created 50 state historic preservation offices. And that was also amended in 1980 to include a certified local government program. So our structure for historic preservation at the federal level, we work with the National Park Service. At the state level, it's the State Historic Preservation Office, which is at History Colorado. And we also call it the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. So all of those are essentially the same thing for you guys. And then at the local level, you have your local Historic Preservation Commission. And then all those different levels also have their own nonprofit partners that they work with. So at the federal level, there's the National Trust for Historic Preservation. At the state level, we have the Colorado Preservation, Inc. and Colorado Historical Foundation. And then at the local level, there's often a local historical society or museums that are nonprofits, as well as some local areas have like nonprofit advocacy groups for historic preservation. So for the Certified Local Government Program, it's a local government partnership with the state and federal governments. Essentially, your local preservation program is certified by the National Park Service and the State Historic Preservation Office as meeting federal and state parameters for preservation programs. We currently have 70 CLGs in Colorado. We had 3 new ones last year, which was super exciting. You guys, Rangeley and Inglewood, so maybe like the most diverse possible performance that you could possibly have. And then there's about 2,100 CLGs nationwide. So our program in Colorado is a really strong program for a state of our population size. For certified local government benefits, we get funding from the federal government for our office, and we're required to subgrant at least 10% of that to our certified local governments. So those are offered as CLG grants each year. Our CLG grant program is structured as it's $25,000 no match grants. And those are for things like preservation plans, surveys and survey plans, design guidelines, education and outreach projects. So things that specifically benefit your committee and your local historic preservation program. And those are generally due every January, but we might be like shifting the timeline slightly back this coming year. So we'll just keep you guys informed of that. There's also National Park Service grants that are specifically for historic preservation. Some of those cover physical construction of properties, and then some are more for survey and National Register designation and things like that. I they just released all of their grants that they were all due in July. So, but I've been told that they'll release a new round of those at some point this fall or winter. So I'll just be communicating with these out in case any of those are of interest. The other big benefit for CLGs is that any locally designated properties or contributing properties to local historic districts are eligible for our state residential and commercial tax credit program. And even though, you know, most of the properties here are designated at a national level, we were just talking about if for some reason there's like a period of significance issue or you need to separately designate something at the local level, then they would get the same tax credit, state tax credit benefits. They wouldn't be able to access federal tax credits, but they would still get the state tax credits if they were doing a rehabilitation project on their property. And then any projects that have some kind of public benefit for designated properties could also be eligible for the state historical fund. The other benefits are access to Compass, which is our statewide cultural resource database. So that essentially tells you what research has been done on properties already, so you don't like duplicate efforts, or so that you know the information that's already out there. We do training. I do a webinar every other month. We actually have one coming up. We have a residential tax credit webinar tomorrow at noon. That our tax credit specialist is leading. And then we have a CLG webinar that's on GIS mapping for disaster resilience, which I'm super excited about, the following Wednesday, so a week from now. So we do that every other month, and then I do a forum for your region, which I think the Western one is coming up in September. We need to organize that. But that way you can see what other local governments are doing in your region as well. And then we also offer scholarships for different educational opportunities like the Saving Places Conference each year. And then technical preservation support. So essentially you can reach out to me and I'll direct you to anyone in our office who can answer the questions you might have. That could be things about your local preservation program, but it could also be something like, you know, what's the appropriate treatment for this building? Or one that comes to mind is like Westminster had reached out about somebody that had graffiti on historic masonry. So I directed them to the person who in our office who knew what products you're supposed to use to clean graffiti off of historic masonry and protect that. So it could be things like that as well. And then if you do have a National Register nomination, there's a formal role in that process for CLGs, and then ability to comment on any federal undertakings. So projects that are federally licensed or federally funded. On the flip side, for CLG responsibilities, the first one is to enforce your own local preservation ordinance. So making sure that you follow your own rules that you've set for yourself. Establish and maintain a commission, which you guys don't have a problem with, obviously. Send meeting minutes over to our office. I read everybody's meeting minutes and try to keep on top of any problems that may be coming up, or sometimes like I'll read in the minutes that people are asking questions in the meeting and they're like, I know the answer to that, so I can help. And then make sure you have adequate public participation, both in your meetings, and then if you have a preservation planning project, like a survey or a preservation plan, making sure there's some sort of public element to that. Maintain a system of survey and inventory. One person from your committee needs to attend at least one training related to historic preservation each year. It doesn't, there's no like particular training that you have to attend, but at least one. And it could be like a past webinar recording, or it could be like a conference or something like that too. So submit an annual report, which those are due every November 1st. And then every 4 years, there's a CLG evaluation. So I guess I'll be back here in either 2 or 3 years. I can't remember which year I put it on for that. Any questions about the CLG program? Just to briefly go over some elements of local preservation programs to keep in mind. Everybody or every local preservation program has their own local preservation ordinance. And you guys just went through the whole like readoption process with your zoning code. So hopefully that's familiar. That is what lets you know what your powers and responsibilities are as a committee. So it's just really important to know your own preservation ordinance. Next is survey. That is what you use to let you know what you have so you can work to preserve it. There's a number of different survey types. But those, essentially the consultants or the people completing the survey would use forms provided by our office. And we have reconnaissance level forms that tell you sort of a base level of information and kind of capture what the property looks like now. And then intensive level survey goes way more in depth into like the construction history of the property and the use history and like ownership history of a property as well. So once you have a survey, you can do designations. That's when you're adding a property to a local state or national register of historic properties. Also at the local level, you'd be doing design review, which you guys already do, which is review of alterations, relocation and demolition of historic properties. There's also a number of incentives. Local governments often adopt their own local incentives for their property owners. And then at the state level, we have our state tax credit program. So for residential or commercial properties, those are worth up to 35% of expenditures for rehabilitating a historic property. So it's just a really great program, especially for residential properties. It's really the only incentive for residential property owners to keep up, with the maintenance and rehabilitate their historic properties. We also have the State Historical Fund. There's also a revolving loan fund at the state level. And then at the federal level, there's federal tax credits, which is an additional 20% for commercial properties that are on the national register. So you could potentially layer, if you're on the national register, 20% federal tax credit, 35% state tax credit, and then maybe also go after a state historical fund grant. So there's ways that you can layer different grants. And if you had incentives at the local level, also. And I should say, we're really lucky in Colorado to have both the tax credit program and the state historical fund. It's pretty rare that we get that type of support. And then the last element of local preservation programs is advocacy and public education. So that's just working with your property owners and business owners, making sure people understand what a great historic town that they live in. I think sometimes it's interesting, just seeing it around the state, people can become blind to how wonderful their resources are and stuff. So making sure that people know, developing this preservation ethic, and that people know that there's incentives available if they need help keeping their properties functional. So just to do a brief, deeper dive into the preservation ordinance. So that's in your land use code articles 2 and 8. If you haven't read it recently, I recommend that you know your ordinance. It's not overly long or anything, but that it's just really important to be able to point to the procedures that you need to follow and the different requirements in both designation as well as design review. Other documents that help with HPC decision-making include your own bylaws, the agendas. So you should be following, what's on the agenda and not adding any sort of additional decisions in meetings that you haven't notified the public that you're working on. Making sure that you're prepared for designation and design review when those cases come up, and knowing, what procedures and criteria are in your ordinance. Evaluating designation and design review. So again, making sure you know all the criteria that are in place so you can properly evaluate these different cases. Making sure that you have clear motions that you can look back on in the future and you still know what you're talking about. and that also helps make it clear for the property owner what they are able to do with their property as far as certificates of appropriateness and things like that. And having those clearly recorded in the meeting minutes, having a clear decision record, and then having public participation and ensuring there's public access to your historic preservation meetings. So next, I was just going to go a bit deeper into design review since I was emailing with Lucy and she mentioned that was something that's been coming up more with the committee. So design review, which is review of alterations, relocation, and demolition of historic properties. is required for every CLG in Colorado. This, like I've said, is really based on your own local ordinance and then the designation of the property. So if the property is contributing to the historic district or non-contributing or as an individual landmark. In Colorado, even though you're required to have design review, it can be either mandatory or voluntary compliance. You guys have mandatory compliance. Voluntary compliance can be kind of complicated in working with property owners because they don't actually have to listen to anything you say. So it makes it a little bit trickier to try to get a positive outcome. Your design review has to be consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards. You can also adopt your own design guidelines as long as they are consistent with the SOI standards. And those design guidelines can help provide more specifics to historic preservation commissions and property owners, since the Secretary of the Interior standards, there's only 10 of them. So they're broad enough to cover every single property in the country. And design guidelines can help, hone in on specific property types and help you be consistent in your decision-making at the local level. So there are 4 different approaches to the Secretary of the Interior standards, but the one that you guys would use the most is the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. That's intended to allow for a new use of the property while still maintaining the historic character of the property. So, you don't have to force people to continue to use an outhouse, and they can build a bathroom in their home. So the SOI standards are generally intended to maintain the historic integrity of properties. So like I said, keeping that character in place. They've been used for more than 40 years as part of the federal preservation framework. They are required to be used by the CLG program and required for most preservation incentives. So if you know a property is going to go after tax credits to finance, then your decision-making will be consistent with the other preservation programs decision-making. So here you can kind of see, the fire station building, they were consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards and maintained the different character features of that property. But then the one on the right, they built this 4-story addition on top, and you wouldn't necessarily even recognize the property for what it was historically. That's a pretty extreme example.
What is SOI?
Secretary of the Interior.
Okay,
So yeah, since our federal partners are with the National Park Service, then we have the standards issued by the Secretary of the Interior. So here's just a brief overview of the 10 standards for rehabilitation. The first one is choose an appropriate use. So you want to, I think that one issue sometimes that comes up with historic preservation commissions is that they are almost too involved in the new use. So you want to stay within your purview as a commission. It's not up to you to decide if a use is appropriate under zoning or things like that. But you want to make sure that the use isn't so far out there that it inherently means that the building has to lose its historic character. So it would either be used as it was historically or have a new use that does not require too many changes. But it can be a very different use, like, for example, a gas station being turned into a restaurant. That doesn't change the character that much, even though it's such a different use. The second one is retain historic character. So you want to make sure that you understand the character defining features of the property and make sure those features and materials are maintained through your decision making. Third is ensure that the building tells a true story of development. So one issue that often comes up in historic mining towns is people will think, especially on little vernacular residences, people will think that it's appropriate to just add Victorian gingerbread elements, and that is still historic, but it actually doesn't tell the true story of what it would have been like to live in the mining times or during the period of significance. So adding on these false elements isn't telling the appropriate story about the property, and it takes away from the character of the property. So that's one thing to keep an eye out for, making sure that the actual history of the property is still reflected, and not either add or subtract elements that take away from that overall, story of the property. 4 is retaining historic changes if they are significant, which can be super tricky in Colorado because we have a ton of these mid-century slip covers that were placed over Victorian era buildings. And a lot of people don't appreciate mid-century slip covers, so they want to take those off and turn it back into what it looked like in 1900. But sometimes the slip covers have gained their own significance. So for example, here you can see, the bottom, like where it was at that stage, it shows how the commercial development changed over time and like how people were trying to attract people to main streets in the 1950s, 60s. So if a property was significant for its commerce through the 1970s, then it would be important to maintain that historic change and not take it back to a previous era. On the other hand, some changes over time, if the period of significance for this property ended in 1940, then it'd be perfectly fine to take off that slipcover. So it just kind of depends on the individual property's story. So really you have to take each property by itself and determine what's best for that individual property, which can be really tricky. I think property owners always want like a blanket statement about what's okay, but you kind of just have to see what they're doing and the circumstances for their individual property. Next is retain character defining features, which is just goes along with the previous standards as well. So making sure that any distinctive materials, features, techniques are preserved. 6 is repair rather than replace. So, it's important to always encourage repair if it's possible on a property, and then replacement as a sort of secondary option if that's not possible. When cleaning, use the gentlest means possible. So making sure that property owners or developers aren't using harsh treatments on their properties that will lead to further damage over time. 8 is protect archaeological resources. Generally, we say the archaeological resources should be maintained where they're found, since that gives them the greatest context. But if they have to be disturbed, then you should have like professional documentation and making sure the artifacts are treated appropriately. And then the last 2 are about additions. These can be, they're also intended to be applied to historic districts. So if you're looking at infill, you would look at the standards 9 and 10 and think about how those apply to the bigger picture of a historic district. Which I think can be a little tricky, but still, thinking about standard 9, designing sympathetic additions. So making sure that any additions or new infill put into a historic district doesn't destroy historic materials, that it maintains the historic features and spatial relationships, that it's both differentiated from the old, so people aren't getting it confused with a historic building. It's also compatible, so it doesn't look like, totally out of place and distract. So, you wouldn't necessarily want like the most, you don't want a building that necessarily draws attention to itself. Like you don't want the most like avant-garde architecture necessarily in a historic district, because that would take away from the historic character of the district. And then making additions reversible. That applies more to individual properties where, a lot of times we see like hyphens. So it's damaging as little of the historic material as possible. And just making sure that if the new addition was taken off and in the future, you could still have, like the whole historic property. Okay, so when you're thinking about those standards and then also what's in your own zoning code, since there are a couple of additional design review requirements as part of that, you need to make sure that any of your decisions are based on the facts of the case and the established criteria and guidelines that you have in place. Accurately document all of your decisions. Don't make your decisions based on personal tastes, opinions of the applicant, because the applicant, of course, wants you to agree with them. So you need to look at it factually versus like emotionally on the side of the applicant. Opinions about potential uses of the property, unless, like I said, it's so different that it destroys the historic fabric of the property. And then information that's not in the public record, which would be like ex parte communications, which can be tricky in a smaller town where you like run into people in the grocery store or whatever. But just making sure that you're not giving any indication of how you would vote on a case, or you know, if somebody has a question about how the committee works, directing them to staff instead of you know, doing that yourself. And that helps you avoid ex parte communication problems. And you know, all the information that you make a decision on is supposed to be what's presented in the meeting. The decision should be based on your relevant ordinances, rules, and procedures, any formal survey and designation information that you have. Hopefully you'll get better documentation soon so that that can help, you know, that'll help outline like what the character defining features are for each property and things like that. And then your own design review criteria and guidelines. You should always clearly state your decisions and try to be consistent in your decision making. And if you're departing from precedent, because each property should be treated individually, make sure it's like really clear why you're departing from any precedent that was in place. Okay, so this is where you guys get to participate. So here we have some storefront alterations. So you can see on the right what the property looked like historically, and then on the left what it looks like now. If the property was significant in the area of commerce between 1902 and 1972, and the property owner wants to return this storefront to be totally flush with the front of the building instead of having this inset storefront, what do you guys think? And would you grant a certificate of appropriateness for that type of change?
I mean, it could be removed without damaging the rest of the building.
I think I'd vote for it.
To go back to it being flush across?
As long as it doesn't damage it.
Yeah, it again could be the standard, you know, start thinking about, you know, changes that have occurred over time, gaining their own significance. Or you could say that it just hasn't gained as, you know, enough significance to be that important and that it could go back to the historic.
That's my opinion. That it hasn't.
So you're talking about the inset underneath the overhang there?
Yes.
And they've inset it to go ahead and allow for people to be maybe in the shade or out of the rain or whatever. And they're talking about bumping that back out to the original sidewalk.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's good.
I think it's,
I think it'd be nice to have it back the way it was.
I think it can be tricky because well, it's more trendy now to have it be flush across versus these, you know, mid-century changes. So it's almost like you have to like not consider what we would necessarily think is most aesthetically pleasing now, and try to determine if that was a significant enough change during the period of significance that it should be maintained. But it doesn't necessarily have to be. Okay, the next one is solar shingles. So this is a property in a historic district with a portion that was constructed in 1903 and then an addition constructed in the 1980s. And they wanted to add these solar shingles just on the, I said the entire roof. And in real life, it was just on the 80s edition. But what would you guys think about granting a certificate of appropriateness for solar shingles over a historic property with a?
What was the original roofing?
Well, it was probably wood shingles and then had already been,
Covered over with.
had already been done in asphalt.
If the historically significant part of the property was 1903, then the 80s part probably isn't historically significant.
And I don't know if you can tell, like this, so the roof is pretty, interestingly shaped on this historic portion. But then the 1980s part is this. So would you, I don't know, do you think that solar shingles would take away from the historic roof line and should be in the 1980s portion only? Or would you be more flexible?
1980s only.
I agree.
I think this will be interesting to see how the technology for solar shingles changes over time, but I've been told that these aren't too reflective, so they don't just like draw your attention only to the roof of the 1980s edition. Okay, this one is we'll say like controversial, so yeah, we wouldn't go into where this is located, but so this property was constructed in 1887. Was this original hotel building. Their period of significance ended in 1920, so it was just 1887 to 1920 for the commerce associated with the hotel. Then in the 1927, so pretty early in this like trend of rustic architecture and there's a big sort of Western like movies and radio shows and things like that led to this rustic architecture. They actually added a whole rustic back addition made of real logs. So the rear addition is made of real logs, and then they covered the whole historic portion in a log veneer, which I think is pretty fun. So the whole thing matched, but like real logs in the back and then a log veneer in the front. The property owner wanted to remove all of that fake log siding and then put wood lap siding on the log structure. So it would look like this. So the front is sort of returning to what it looked like in 1920. And then the rear addition has lap siding over the logs. What do you guys think about that as a proposal?
Well, I think it's a good idea. I think it's just,
Better. Sure.
what do you do with windows in older buildings like that? I mean, one of the things you had earlier up said that if you're replacing things, they should be made out of the same materials as original. Would the one here on the lower right, if they're redoing that, would they go out and then have new windows milled for that were done similar to the original windows, or would the national standards allow the extruded aluminum?
Yeah, so it kind of depends, like the preference would be for wood windows, but there are aluminum products that can be used instead. I think mainly don't use vinyl. Yeah, this was a tough one because this era where you have a sort of celebration of the rustic in Colorado, and I don't know, this like transition from sort of Victorian era respectability into celebrating like this Old West image was a really important trend in architecture, and then also trying to get tourists in Colorado. So, you could say that this log structure with the fake log on top also had achieved significance over time. And then one of the issues with this new rendering is that what they created has never existed in history because they are putting lap siding over the log structure. So then is it okay to like just return the front older structure to its lap siding, and then you have to keep the logs, the log structure as log? Or is it better to like encourage a unified look, even though that's something that never existed in history?
If you'd had a historical preservation committee in 1920, would they have allowed them to put slab siding over the original Victorian? I mean,
Probably not.
it probably wouldn't have occurred.
And if the period of significance ends in 1920, then that seems perfectly reasonable to go back to that time period, right? So. Okay, and then this one is some infill. So residential infill, you can see the historic homes here on the top left. Do you think that any of these proposed infill properties, which obviously were actually constructed, are appropriate for that historic district? So are they differentiated enough, but also complementary enough?
Middle one looks pretty modern.
The solid balcony on the middle one looks like it doesn't belong with the spindle vertical lines of the original
Yeah.
structures.
Do you think if that balcony or that, patio area was
Balcony on the third one too, I'd say no.
Yep, I agree.
no to all of
Like the.
Just the red one.
The red one maybe,
But it's using modern materials. I agree, the middle one looks weird, but maybe it is a balcony, it's hard to identify.
it'd look nice in a different neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't know if that balcony was changed to be more, if you did have like separate spindles or something slightly different, if it would feel more appropriate. Okay, and then here we have some additions. So this top one, example one, obviously you've got the historic building on the left, and then that whole right-hand side building is an addition. So they have like a little hyphen in between, and then it, basically the square footage of the property. And then this example two is pretty wild to me. So you've got the, historic house in front, and that probably had a historic addition here. And then they built this entirely new addition on the back there. So, it is on the rear of the property, but it's on the street. So it's like you could see the entire thing from side street. What do you guys think about those two options for additions?
A no on two.
The one on the left looks better than the one on the right.
I'd say.
And example one is.
Yeah, probably.
So the one on the left might read as like a separate infill,
It doesn't,
being too closely.
I say no on both.
Yeah, I think it's because the other one has like such a high connector, it really makes it so obvious that it's one structure. And it's like, that makes it look really bizarre.
Yeah, and it's on a slope too. So I think that even though it,
Yeah, it's visually prominent.
so that's one where you would want to take into consideration the actual like geographic terrain of the property. And even if it's like technically meeting, your zoning requirements and stuff like that, it might not really fit in with the character because it reads as so much higher than the original property. Okay, great. So yeah, that was some examples to consider for design review. And then just the last thing I wanted to talk about was what you guys are interested in doing with your historic preservation program as a new CLG. And I copied the little like preservation plan section from your CLG application. So that included conducting a comprehensive survey of historic buildings or historic properties, establishing a local registry, assisting property owners with grant opportunities and tax incentives, recognizing and honoring Ute history, maintaining the character of the historic district, and then incorporating public art and historic interpretation to tell the story of Silverton's heritage. And then just some questions to consider. Are there any properties that are under threat of development and demolition that you would want to be sure to both document and maybe like focus on working with the property owners on incentives and things like that? What histories have not yet been explored and recorded? What projects would help to generate community enthusiasm about historic preservation? What projects are supported by your master plan and other planning documents that are already in place, which can really help with getting grants because you can say like, this has already been vetted and gone through a public process, and here's the exact page where this project fits in when you're going after grants. What projects align with wider community goals if you have like housing affordability goals or sustainability goals, economic development, things like that. What projects help support the development of your own preservation program? And then what projects would you consider quick wins to help gain momentum for the program that you can build on for the future? So I guess, yeah, with those in mind, I'm curious what you guys think and what your priorities would be for the next few years of your preservation program.
I would just like us to see us persevere with preserving all the historic buildings we have and make sure that they're maintained in a caring manner and we can pass them on to the next generation.
It seems like most of the holes in our town, I know there's one down across from Grand Imperial where the snow load family made the building collapse. But most of them are due to fires. And it seems like sustainability and preservation should go ahead and deal with fire mitigation and encouraging, even maybe with incentives to go ahead and have, fire mitigation, fire installed throughout the area.
Yeah, I think that's.
I mean, we're relying on volunteer fire departments. Luckily, they don't get a whole weekly training with live incidents, but occasionally when it does occur, we're kind of overwhelmed. I mean, last time we had a big fire, they were calling for help from Uray and from Durango, and by the time anything gets here from either place, there's not much left.
Right. Yeah, and I think, that's been like a very important topic over the past, well, at least like 5 to 10 years, and developing resources for fire, like appropriate treatments for fire mitigation. Those have gotten better over time, but a lot of the stuff coming out of the National Park Service for disaster is focused on hurricanes. So it's kind of have to extrapolate like general principles that they're using for flooding and apply those to fire. But a lot of those is like thinking about treatments that still maintain historic character, but knowing that it is appropriate to do some treatments to properties, even if some character is like sacrificed. I also think having survey work done is really important so that you have all of your properties documented appropriately, so that if something does happen, what was there, what can be potentially like reconstructed. That would help you apply for emergency grants from the State Historical Fund. So I think having that as a goal of your overall survey project would also be super beneficial. And you can add that to an urgency argument as well for a grant, in saying that, you need to have these properties documented over time. So I guess on a personal note, so I'm from Superior, Colorado. My, hometown burned down in the Marshall Fire. And luckily, all the historic properties had been documented in a survey about 20 years ago. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that thorough record of what was there previously that burned down. So I think it is really important to at least document everything. And that also helps you respond more appropriately because you know what you have. yeah, I wish that wasn't something we had to deal with.
So does the national fire requirements, I forget what NF, whatever that those initials are, do they require or do they come in conflict with the preservation standards? I mean, I see now like international building codes and stuff, I think go ahead and require having fire sprinkler systems even in private homes by some year. And of course, I don't think we haven't adopted those.
Yes, it depends on what was adopted by your town. And then for like the existing building code, so you'd be working like closely with your building official to see what they would allow and what is appropriate for different historic properties. So it also depends on like how close your properties are to each other and things like that as well. But I don't think that they necessarily have to conflict, you know, we're like working to find the best solution to still maintain character while you know, saving the property if it does come down to it with fire. Any other preservation projects that come to mind that you guys would be excited to work on, like community outreach or things like that?
Well, I think it's important that we do the survey, and I don't know if we've done that yet. And,
Right.
you know, God forbid if the town burns down,
Yeah.
we don't have a record. So I think that, to me, that's a priority.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. When we, that I think is staff's number one priority right now is getting a survey done.
Good.
And, you know, I think that part of that survey requires community outreach and community engagement. And I think, you know, I think that's also a priority of this program. And I think, you know, seeing, you know, what kind of engagement we do and what kind of interest we see in that process will kind of kickstart future engagement opportunities, which I think would be really valuable for our community. Because we have a lot of new people that come to town and they don't understand, you know, all the history of all of our buildings and what this community's seen. So yeah, definitely a priority.
And I would think about, you know, when you're doing the survey project, traditionally, like a consultant will come in and they'll just have like 2 public meetings, one at the beginning of the project and one at the end. And thinking about ways that do a better job of like reaching the public would be, that's a great role for Historic Preservation Committee. You know, you guys know where people already are and you know, what like news resources they turn to, or, you know, how can you get people's attention so that they want to contribute if they knew something about their own property's history. Are there like, it can be hard in a town with like a lot of tourism, but are there like places that you can specifically work with property owners, you know, to be able to help to increase their appreciation of their own local history? So I think, you know, like Glenwood Springs is kind of in a similar situation where if they table at different community events, they just get a lot of tourists coming in, which is great, like to let the tourists know about the history. But if you're trying to work with your property owners and let them know about incentives and things, are there other locations that you can reach those people? So they actually do like a big display in the library during Preservation Month in May, because that's mainly used by locals so that they can reach them and let them know about projects that are going on and preservation incentives that are available. So, you know, if you know of places like that where, or community gatherings that we can reach out to property owners, that's a great role, you know, for you to be able to think about. Well, great. So I shared the presentation with Lucy already, but here's my contact information and always feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions anytime and be a resource for you guys. But thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lindsay.
All those examples that you gave, those are all like things that did happen.
Yes,
Approved.
they're all in Colorado, so.
Do you guys have any questions for Lindsay or for me?
No.
Okay, sweet.
Think of anything, I'll obviously be here for the rest of the meetings.
Sweet, thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
So we will move on to agenda item 3, application review. 26-12 HDOM 1142 Green Street, a major historic district overlay review application proposing exterior rehabilitation at 1142 Green Street within the MU1 downtown mixed-use zoning district. Applicant Shay Coburn.
Sweet, thank you. All right, the project location for this application is 1142 Green Street within the MU1 zoning district and the historic district overlay. The applicant is Shay Coburn of Urban Rural Continuum, Michigan. You go to attendees? No. We do have representatives in the audience, and Jonathan Sylvester on behalf of Bonanza Boy LLC. All required documents were submitted on June 22nd. So 1142 Green Street is also known as the Old Livery Building or the Livery, which was built in 1897 and was used as a livery stable, and later as a garage, retail, and residential uses. The structure is historically significant. It's a contributing building to the Silverton National Historic Landmark District. And the structure features original masonry, large windows, and historic signage that has since been removed. The plan proposes to rehabilitate the facade to the historic 1906 look, which is when this photo was taken. Again, featuring those large doors, entry door, and windows as seen in the photo. Existing materials, including the original masonry, wood panels, and parapets will be rehabilitated rather than replaced. Features that cannot be repaired will be recreated based on the 1906 photo. No misleading historic features will be added. There is a planned second floor. So that includes expanding the rear portion of the building and a rooftop addition that will be differentiated from the historic structure and compatible in scale and materials, which is best practice, as we just learned from Lindsay. The rooftop and all roof mechanical equipment will be shielded from view on Green Street, as seen in the site plan, and the historic facade will remain generally unchanged in size and scale. You can see they're planning on adding back kind of the size of that original sign. And the rehabilitation project will restore the original building features, generally having a positive impact on the historic character of the district. And just for some background, here's a quick overview of the project as a whole, not just the facade treatment. And if you have questions, the applicants can speak more to this. But the applicant is proposing an adaptive reuse project with an emphasis on historic preservation, economic development, and affordable housing, all directly aligned with the 2022 Compass Master Plan goals. The proposed uses include retail fronting Green Street, 3 hotel rooms, and 6 units of affordable housing restricted at 100% average median income, as well as a rooftop deck. The renovations are ADA compliant, and the housing units will be deed restricted. That's just some project background. But the purpose of the review is to review the exterior renovations proposed per Silverton Municipal Code Section 15840G states that exterior renovations shall be reviewed by the Historic Preservation Committee at a public meeting. That's not required to be a public hearing. So now we'll move through the review criteria. The applicant's full response to the review criteria is included in their application, and staff's full analysis is included in the staff report, but we'll go through them now. If you have any questions, just feel free to stop me. All right, first, is that Green Street mixed use is required. The plan proposes an active principal non-residential use on the ground floor, extending 36 feet deep, which exceeds the requirements. And this will be retail / cafe and hotel lobby. Build to line, the facade remains on the lot line unchanged from the historical alignment and in compliance with the standard. Architectural projections, the design includes reconstruction of the original triangular entrance feature, which you can see in the 1906 photo. And there will be balcony projections into the alleyway. Upon initial review, staff has no concerns with these projections, and they will be reviewed again for compliance during the building permit stage. No blank walls. There will be no blank walls visible from Green Street. The building, this subject building is flanked by two-story buildings. Screening, all utilities facing Green Street will be screened as shown in the submitted plans. All right, compliance with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. We will go through those now. And just to note, the project team is seeking historic tax credits for the project, which gives an additional incentive to plan to meet these standards. So first off is appropriate use. The original use of a livery stable is not feasible today. We don't rent horses anymore. I guess we could, but we're not typically doing that. So this is an adaptive reuse project, proposing only minimal changes to the structure while rehabilitating historic features and materials, transitioning the building to a mixed use, commercial, residential, and hospitality uses. All right, next up, the historic character of the property is retained and preserved. The removal of distinctive materials or alterations of features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize a property will be avoided. As I noted earlier, the plan proposes to rehabilitate the facade to its historic 1906 look. So existing materials will be rehabilitated rather than replaced, both inside and out. I'm stealing some of Lindsay's language from her presentation to shorten these, so thank you for that. Ensure that the building tells a true story of development. So upon review, there are no misleading historic features proposed in the plan. And again, rehabilitation is done in accordance with that 1906 photo. The building retains historic changes if significant. There are no documented alterations that require preservation on this specific project. Distinctive material features and finishes and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property will be preserved. Like I noted, the existing materials such as masonry, wood panels, and parapets will be retained and rehabilitated. The deteriorated historic features will be repaired rather than replaced. The plan shows that those features I just mentioned will be rehabilitated rather than replaced. And any features that cannot be repaired will be recreated based on the 1906 photo. Their chemical or physical treatments, if appropriate, will be undertaken using the gentlest means possible. The applicant states that proper treatment of historic materials will be utilized. The owners will be hiring experienced contractors who are well versed with proper rehabilitation techniques and methods. Archaeological resources will be protected and preserved. The applicant states that there are no archaeological resources known at this time. The Historical Society did not have any comment on this either. If archaeological resources are found and identified during the course of this work, mitigation measures will be undertaken. New additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy historic materials, features, or spatial relationships of the property. The new work will be differentiated from the old and will be compatible with the historic materials, features, size, scale, and proportion and massing. In your packet, you can see the plans for the proposed second story, including the materials being used. The planned second floor expansion and rooftop addition will be differentiated from the historic structure and compatible in scale and materials. The historic facade will remain unchanged in size and scale. New additions, adjacent or related new construction will be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form of the integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. The applicant states that the addition will be built on top of the current building and the old building will remain in place and be rehabilitated. Okay, moving on back to our standards facade treatments. The proposed rehabilitation of the original 50-foot facade complies with this standard, essentially saying that facades cannot extend larger than 50 feet. Entryways, the entry door will be ADA accessible and swing, ADA accessible swing and the code required adjustments. The project also is changing the sidewalk, as you've probably noticed, the boardwalk out there. The sidewalk will be modified for ADA compliance. Historic glass garage doors will be rehabilitated and pinned in place, providing storefront windows true to the building's history. All windows will remain in their original configuration, meeting this standard. And that is all for standards. So besides internal review, no referral agency comments were received. This includes the Historical Society. They did not provide comment on this application. So based on staff's review, we are recommending approval of the application as presented. And you all have 4 options in front of you tonight. Approve the application with stated conditions, deny the application for stated reasons, or table the review of the application to a date certain. And here are your sample motions. I couldn't include the full motion for all 4, but those are included in your packet. And I am happy to pull this screen back up if you need it. But if there are no quick initial questions, I'll hand it back over to the committee to invite the applicants to speak.
Okay.
So with the sidewalk, now I see in the picture here, there's a boardwalk on the right-hand side. Was there originally like a board? Well, it wasn't a boardwalk all the way across because you wouldn't drive a wagon across a board walk, I wouldn't think.
I'm not sure. I know a lot of streets in Silverton did have boardwalk sidewalks. So potentially.
So I'm sorry. So are we talking about the wooden sidewalk? Is there a permanent feature?
No, they will be putting in a concrete sidewalk that meets the town's current development standards. Yeah. The boardwalk is just allows for people.
Yeah,
to walk
sure. No, it's very
right
nice.
now.
It's nicely done.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Lucy.
Yeah.
Applicant. Please state your name and make your presentation.
Jonathan Sylvester with Bonanza Boy LLC. We love Silverton. I've said that before. I have no additional slides or content, but really a lot of the points Lindsay mentioned, we've had to learn the hard way. That these projects are big and beautiful and expensive. But because of the historic nature, it's special. And because of these grants, it helps make it doable. Yeah, super excited about it and pleased that it's been fun to work with our preservation architect, Tim Stroh, fun to work with Shay, we have a wonderful local contractor, Brian Anderson and his local team. So it's been a pleasure and challenging, but mostly pleasure. Any questions for me on behalf of the team and the owners?
So far in the process of doing all the, demolition, like, have you made any changes to your plan? Have there been any surprises that have come up?
I wouldn't say any surprises. We're pleased by how good the building actually is, how good the bones are. The brick is smooth and straight and the chimneys aren't cracked. So we're just really pleased at that. Brian and his crew gutted it down to the big beams. We are able to keep most of those big beams. We have to shore up the foundations for each of those, and but no big surprises, good or bad. I'm personally pleased by this plan. The front was always 2 stories, then it sloped back, and if you ever went inside the building, there were these funny Alice in Wonderland shrinking rooms. I love Tim's new design that keeps that historic angle, but then hinges up so we can have, it was always 2 stories, but now it's 2 full stories, which then let us do those extra 3+3 affordable housing. So it's to have 6 new houses in town. It's fun for us, and it's a, hopefully a boon to the community. So pleased by how fun that is, and how then that also enables, whoa, since we now have a new flat roof, how much more pain would it be to put a rooftop deck or, private events, community events? So pleasant surprises that so far we're seeing green lights on these designs.
I have a question for you. I'm pleased and impressed by your plans for the livery. I'm just wondering about parking. You're gonna have probably 15 at least cars every night parked on Green Street. I call it Main Street.
Yeah, the lowercase m Main Street, it is the main thoroughfare.
So I have a concern with that because all these communities around here and probably all across the country, we have problems with parking. And so how are you guys gonna handle that?
We also really care, and we're mindfully concerned and trying to solve it as we go. Being on Green Street, as I understand, we don't have a requirement to add parking, but as smart business operator, we want to make sure our guests can park.
Right.
That is, that, I'd say it wouldn't the number one, that was probably tied for number one driver of us buying the old Silverton Square property, because that gives us additional parking. Day one, we have, 8 to 10 more parking spaces right there. With some, we still assume some guests will find their spots on Green Street, but then others will. That was our radius of how close can we be to the livery, and the Silverton Square was close enough. Also a cool building that I'm sure we're going to talk to you guys about in the future. But that gives us quite a bit, maybe not 100% of the parking we need, but it takes a dent in the parking need.
Be kind of hard to schlep your suitcase from Silverton Square to the livery.
We'll have, my teenage kids are going to be the schleppers. We really will have, like, drop off and shuttle.
Okay.
Silverton Station will be home of the shuttle. And then they may even just leave their luggage there, and it can be shuttled up for the 3 guests staying at the livery. And then the other guests staying up at the county project, 8 miles away.
Okay.
And then if we need to expand, we'll find another burned down lot. And
Well, you got one on the corner there.
we were currently renting one on the corner for that because we needed space to store and stage material. So that is how we solved it. It was by renting that from a local couple.
Okay.
It's great.
You guys want to talk to Tim, the architect of the beautiful design?
I do have a couple.
Yeah.
So, hi, everybody. Tim Stroh. I'm the architect of record for this. And if you have questions, I also did the Silverton State or the Citizen State Bank project too. So you had a question about NFPA.
Yeah,
Great question. So since you've adopted the International Building Code, which also sort of adopts the international existing building code, that gives architects like me or engineers the opportunity to work through the building codes, but the NFPA is basically baked into those codes and the fire code. And so it gives designers a direct path to figure out which way to go. So for instance, using the existing building code, I was able to prove out that we do not have to do fire sprinklers to make a fire safe building and life safety wise. But with the livery building, it's large enough and there's enough mixed use in there that there was absolutely no choice. We have to sprinkler it. But that's all baked in there. So there's certain triggers in the building code that automatically require it, that for the NFPA stuff. So it's a great question. It's integrated into the codes that you've already adopted for commercial buildings. I don't know about residential. I don't really mess with those too often. So yeah, it's a good question. So I just want to answer that unless you have other technical questions.
Anybody?
I have a request.
Okay.
So if you were to approve this tonight, then we think you might have some support for the project. We are applying for a state historical fund grant for October 1. And if the commission might be amenable to it, a letter of support from the commission for the project. It's going to be a grant just for the facade work from the state historical fund. So if you want to do a letter of support, we'd sure love and welcome that. So that's October 1st. October sometime.
Is that the business?
Thanks.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any committee discussion? Questions for staff or applicant? Hearing none. How about a motion?
I move to approve 2612 HDM 1142 Green Street, a major historic district overlay review application proposing exterior rehabilitation at 1142 Green Street within the MU1 downtown mixed-use zoning district.
Okay,
Second.
we have a motion and a second. A roll call?
Okay. Melissa Childs.
Yes.
Rick Swanson.
Yes,
Maria Samora.
Yes.
Carl Schnecker.
Yes.
Please have it.
Great. Application approved. Thank you all.
Okay, motion passes.
Hey, for Lindsay.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, guys.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 4, committee business. So I suppose that, how do we move forward with this letter of support?
Yeah, if you wanted to give me direction to draft that letter of support, I could draft that and just bring it to you in the next meeting agenda, so that it's properly noticed, everything. And then if you can make a motion to approve it then. Is that
In favor of that?
Yeah,
I am also.
Okay,
Okay, Lucy, if you could.
Great.
directed.
Thank you,
You
Lucy.
direct.
action received. I will get that on the next agenda.
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other committee business? Anybody?
Any notices?
No.
Yeah.
No?
We do not have any notices of decision.
Okay, we'll slide right into public comment.
I do not believe we have anyone online.
Any public comment online?
Seeing none. How about in the room? Okay. I think that is it. Suppose we need a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, we'll do a motion to adjourn.
Well, I can make that one.
Okay.
I'll move we adjourn.
A second.
Okay.
All right.
All in favor? Yes. Okay, this meeting is adjourned
Right.
at 5:49.
Perfect.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lindsay, for the presentation.
Yes, thank you.